in Urban Mission, was it, David? In International Christian College in Glasgow. A number of us will know him, and I've had a bit of contact with him and heard him as a speaker, and he immediately said, would you like to come and do a seminar? I'd love that. We're actually twinning this seminar with next month's, because this month we're looking at this sort of mystical idea of cities and what they are and kind of what they stand for in our sort of inside our heads. But next month we're going to look at Stirling City with Andy Kennedy, and right on cue, he's just walked in the door there. Andy, nice to see you. Oh, he's dropped his money all over the floor. And Andy is city centre manager here. So another reason for putting your name down in the email list will be in contact with our email constituency, saying, hey, what do you think about Stirling? Because we've got this person coming and he's the very person to put your point to. So that's for the future. But David, thank you very much for coming, and we'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, if I remain seated. That kind of seems nice and informal, rather than standing up and talking down. Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation to come and to share over this lunchtime. I ought to just begin, I think, by explaining where I'm coming from in terms of this topic. I'm not an urban professional in the sense that I have ever taught in any of the disciplines that relate to the understanding of the city. I'm not really quite sure what I am. I mean, I've been described, I remember somebody once describing me as a generalist, which I'm never quite sure what that is. But I think it means that I've ranged across a whole area of ministry, reflection, study. Been a pastor in the city of Cambridge for 11 years. I worked in a rural location in southeast Nigeria, far away from the city, in a very, very bush situation. But while I was in Nigeria, I did quite a lot of preaching, and I found myself a couple of weeks in the slums of Lagos, which really, I suppose, was the beginning of asking really serious questions about urbanization. And as you've heard, I've most recently been in International Christian College in Glasgow. And my reason for going to Glasgow was an invitation to work with a team in ICC to develop and deliver a postgraduate program in ministry in an urban world. Glasgow, the folk in Glasgow at ICC were aware that the college had a long urban tradition. It was founded in the 1880s as the result of the visits of the American evangelist D.L. Moody. It had always been closely associated with a whole range of Christian social activity in Glasgow, and yet it had never had within its program serious reflection on the nature of the city and what the particular challenges were and are that the city presents to Christian thinking and Christian practice. So I came with apprehension, but with the knowledge that I was working with a group of people who were extremely gifted, and as a team we were able to put together a master's program that is validated by the University of Aberdeen. And it's designed to help people who work in urban locations, whether that is in Europe or in the Southern Hemisphere, to utilize a range of information and knowledge that helps understand the nature of the city, if you like, to read, to interpret the urban context in which they work, and then to ask questions about their ministry in relation to that context. That's enough about the program. I'm not here to promote the program, but just to indicate that that's where I come from. So that although over the last 8-9 years, most of my reading, I think it's true to say, has been urban related. It is for a specific purpose, and that is to help people who are involved in work in urban contexts, sometimes in extremely difficult and tough urban contexts. For example, we have established a partnership with an urban mission training centre in the slum of Kibera in Nairobi, and one requirement of this programme is that students attend 4 residencies over 2 years. One of those residencies is in Nairobi, because we want people to be aware that what they may have experienced as the city has a very different feel and a very different look elsewhere in the world. And a week spent partly visiting within the slum of Kibera is an eye-opener and an enormous challenge. So what I'm sharing with you comes from the reflection that's been related to this programme over the past 8 or 9 years. I thought I'd begin first of all with a few lines from a poem, and then with reference to a couple of pictures. The poem comes from T.S. Eliot, and it's from a poem entitled Choruses from the Rock. And it's haunted me since I began reflecting on the challenge of the city. These lines come toward the end of the poem. When the stranger says, "What is the meaning of this city? Do you huddle close together because you love each other? What will you answer? We all dwell together to make money from each other, or this is a community." So Eliot is suggesting that there are 2 ways of reading the city. There may be other ways, but he's identifying 2 ways. That the city is essentially commercial, that it's a place where the economic factor comes into play in a way that it never did in pre-urban times in rural traditional societies. And people therefore are isolated because the purpose of the city, the meaning of the city, is that this is a place of economic prosperity where we make money from each other. Or the alternative that he offers us is that it's possible to say that within the city there is the possibility of a far greater sense of community than has ever existed before. Later on in the poem, there are a couple more lines in which he says this: "O my soul, be prepared for the coming of the stranger. Be prepared for him who knows how to ask questions." Now, Eliot doesn't identify the stranger. I think the assumption must be that it's Christ, but he's not linking this specifically to Christ. But what he's saying, I think, in this poem is we have to be ready for the coming of someone who can ask deep questions, who can ask questions that are at a really fundamental level, that get below the surface. And I found that enormously challenging, because it has seemed to me that very often